Brahma Chaloka Dipati Sahampati Katanjali Anadiwarang Ayachata Santida Sataparaja Kajatika Yese Ju Damang and Kampimang Jang.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Good morning again, everyone. Hope you're all well. And here in Canmore, it's quite overcast today. I think we've got some storms coming, quite chilly and damp. It's damp for the first time since I arrived. It used to be really dry before the rain started, but the rain is very good, I hope, as long as it doesn't flood. And that's how it is, isn't it? It's from one thing to another. We're really not in control, are we? Gosh. But we can make the most of the situation that we're in, that's for sure, with great appreciation and gratitude, for what we've got. And the main thing for me is, as human beings, we have this capacity to reflect, we have the capacity to learn from our experience. Every kind of experience can be a teaching for us. And oftentimes I find myself that the experiences that are difficult, painful, and upsetting are the real learning points, the real opportunities to get wisdom, acquire wisdom. And but it's not always easy, is it? And yet the Buddha kind of simplifies everything for us, because he really pointed out, there's simple reasons why we suffer. And in a sense, for me, I feel there's the sort of bigger picture suffering, in the sense of having been born at all, So the Buddha was really saying that, the reason we're born is because of past karma. So it's like there's an energy that's created this life. And he said you have to have certain things come together, like the mother and the father, and the right time. There has to be the right time, the season, which is perhaps something to do with the mother's fertility cycle, or, he said the right mother, the father in the right time. But then there also has to be a being. There has to be an energy from outside that comes into that situation, which is the energy of karma, but mainly bhava tanha. Karma is sense desire, but bhava tanha is this force of the strong wish, the desire, the craving to become, to be. And this is the baseline, really, that enables and causes all the creation that we are now experiencing. So there's the bigger picture of why we're here. We're here because of past karma. You could say unfinished business, or energy that's has momentum. It has momentum. And we can categorize karma into good and bad, wholesome and unwholesome. We can do that. We can say there's the karma that leads to more suffering, and the karma that leads to happiness. But both sides are energies that propel us and move forward, into the next moment, the next moment. So there's that bigger picture of having been born at all. Well, we just have that, don't we? We can't not have that. Even if we try to end it all, we still continue. It still continues. So birth, of course, as the Buddha said. So in this bigger picture, scale of suffering for us, birth is the cause of aging, the cause of sickness, and the cause of death. So once we've been born, now we're here. That's part of the package, and you can't have the birth without the other things, and so all of that comes with birth. It's a bit like for me, when there's a pleasant experience, that's like birth, pleasant experience, something lovely happening, and there's so many of those. Life's pretty good, I hope, for many people. Pleasant, wonderful experiences of joy and beautiful nature around us, and good things happening. And primarily, the root of that, of course, is that there's some good feeling in the body. Something happens, some input, some thought from the past, some past karma arises for us, and it produces a pleasant feeling in the body, and that's pleasure for us. But this is a bit like birth. It's a bit like this is the birth kind of experience. But every birth experience, every experience of pleasure has within it the seed of death, the seed of old age, sickness, and death. So we can say from the macrocosm, the bigger picture, down to the moments, one at a time, even to the most mundane experiences, this is exactly how it is. So every moment has the seed of death in it, arising and passing. And the Buddha said, of course, this is the problem with happiness, worldly happiness. The problem is that it doesn't last. So it dies. Everything that arises passes away. And actually, it's not in fact a problem. It's only a problem if we attach to the birth. If we celebrate the birth without recognizing. In fact, we can even celebrate the birth, can't we? But we can recognize in celebrating birth that we inevitably will be grieving death, and seeing the wholeness of that, actually, we can step back from it and we can begin to let go. And rather than grieving and celebrating, we just observe, and we can learn for everything then. Nature is the great teacher, isn't it? And we are nature, and we can observe nature within, and we can observe nature all around us. And it's the same old nature, and it's the same laws that apply. So it's rather wonderful, really. And as we do, continue to develop this ability to be the knower, to learn from all our experience, that sense of separation between what's inside and what's outside becomes quite, it starts to fade away. And we don't take our lives so personally anymore. And that's very, very helpful for us, isn't it? Because if we take our lives personally, then this birth and the death and the old age and the sickness coming here have great significance, earth-shattering significance that completely eclipses everything else that's going on. And that's tragic, because why suffer? But if we step back from this sense of this one, this little world here, which has its, with all respect, the whole universe is to be found right here. But if we can recognize that this is like a sort of mirror of the whole, this experience we're having, we can look around and see how it extends everywhere, in every direction, in every situation. These laws apply. And then that sense of, being obsessed about this one, it can start to fade a little bit, and And we get more interested really in the bigger picture and what's going on around us. And, letting go of the survival instincts, the grasping onto this life is really the way forward. And it's essential if we want to be happy in a genuine way, in a way that's not shaken by circumstances, our own, small worlds. So there's Paritta, there's a very small mind, but we can expand the mind through our practice. It happens naturally, doesn't it? Because we sit with different experiences in here and we learn equanimity. We learn to just be with what's happening, arising and passing, pleasant and unpleasant, sometimes very strong feelings. Sometimes a little thing can happen. Just a tiny incident can happen in our lives. It's quite humiliating, I find. A little tiny incident happens and then you have this huge response, total trauma, which of course is what it is. We have trauma, most of us, in the body, in the mind, and so there can be a trigger sometimes. Something will happen and it will chime in with so many times that we've experienced similar sorts of things, and it's been very painful and difficult. And perhaps one time when it was really life-threatening, or really terribly, terribly frightening, a sort of echo of a traumatic experience. These things can happen for us on a daily basis. Something happened, just a little thing, and boom, I'm in total terror, or I'm in anger, or I'm really upset, in all different ways. So we're very sensitive, aren't we? And very, very, very vulnerable beings, as long as we have the roots within the mind of desire and aversion. And as long as we don't see things clearly, we're incredibly vulnerable. We can be really hurt and harmed, or feel really hurt and harmed, which is the same thing when you're in it, isn't it? So, thankfully the practice gives us a handle on all of this, and we can, through becoming the observer, through studying studying reality, investigating Dharma with mindfulness and effort, then we become, we can really observe these things happening, and we don't necessarily then get overwhelmed. We start to come out of the overwhelm, and we start to flow with nature and see, oh my goodness, emotions very strong sometimes, like a really strong tsunami coming through. And if we don't know to expect these things, and if we don't know how to work with these things, we can just get drowned, lose all mindfulness and feel a victim and be adding to our suffering, by reacting again and again. And this is what we've been doing, the Buddha tells us, for countless lifetimes. But if we have, begin to get a sense of giving more energy to the observing, witnessing of reality, rather than being in it, immersed in it, then we can start to even see the tsunami. We can even perceive that that's what it is. There's a big wave coming over, washing through the system. Oh, this is really, I've got nothing to hold on to here. I'm just going to be completely swept away. But I can know that. And then recognizing that there's a part of this experience that's not being swept away, which is that which is knowing it. The observing of the experience is absolutely stable. It's not part of samsara. It's quite able to maintain a sense of ground within the storms. It's a bit like the eye of the hurricane. It's like we can choose where we put ourselves in the hurricane. We can be whirling around, or we can go right to the heart of the matter right to the middle. I think it's true of waves as well, isn't it? You can get right to the middle, you can sort of dive into the center of the thing, and it basically passes over very quickly. And you can bob back up again and you're back. It's past. So the more we can exercise and cultivate this degree of mindfulness that we're all really, able to know already, the more we can cultivate this quality, the more still the mind becomes, and the more we can really observe very clearly the way of nature, which is arising and passing, and things almost can sort of speed up. We can because we're not adding anything to the situation. If we're in a difficult situation, our tendency, of course, our conditioning is to add fear and anxiety and grief and anger and all sorts of layers on top that build the waves, add to the hurricanes. But if we, are really mindful, we have the equanimity, we develop equanimity and stillness, and we can even see the tendency, the inclination to add, and we can let go of those inclinations to add more distress where there is distress, and focus on the heart of the matter. How does it feel? Just that, in the body. Breathe. And we can breathe deep and just focus on that. And that takes us, boom, right to the heart of the storm, the still point. Quite timeless. So we're not waiting for anything to happen. We're not waiting for anything to change. We're not trying to get out of something anymore. We're not flailing to get away. And we're not moving towards the pleasant either. When it's a pleasant experience, we're just there. We're right there in the center. And then, nature is constantly changing, and we're not trying to make it. We're not ignorantly holding on to the past. We're letting things move through. And there we are. Things move through. And once we've had this experience a few times, isn't it wonderful? We have faith. We have a confidence that I've been able to just sit steady with some very strong emotions, and I didn't react, and I could watch them actually cease. Wow. We have this incredible freedom and agency then. It's very empowering. The Dharma is powerful. It's empowering. If we just align ourselves with the Dharma, with truth, with reality, and just keep letting go of anything that's not that, letting go of our reactivity, letting go of our sense of self, We don't own any of it. We're just, watching the show. And if we have this attitude, then we are actually obliterating the karma that brought us here. The karma that brought us here, we are dismantling. We are allowing it to finish itself. The unfinished business can get finished here. And peace is the result. So when we have moments of noticing waves passing through, and then there's a peaceful interlude, that's the end of some karma right there. And we can be very sure that it doesn't come back. Once we've enabled peace, cessation and peace, then these things become like part of our experience. So we notice that the mind becomes gradually more peaceful as we practice, gradually lighter. We're carrying less weight of past karma. And we're moving into the freedom from all karma. And it's a process that, has an end point, which is nirvana. And it's inevitable, that's where we're heading when we practice, and we really give attention to the practice, and we know what we're doing. We have the right view, understand the cause of our suffering is when we react to the way it is. That's all. So when something's happening, if I start to feel upset, or I feel a sort of movement towards something. I want to make it more of mine. I want to hold on to it. Or something's happening and I just don't want it to be happening. There's the place of reactivity. So, you know, to notice these movements of the mind is really very, very beneficial for us, because we can be practicing constantly then, and we can catch the habits, catch the conditioning, and see it for what it is, and let it go. And the whole movement, in a way, is one away from reactivity towards stillness, being very still and steady within. And we can start to have a sense of what that is like, to be very still inside, and cool and quiet and calm. And we can appreciate that. Actually, a lot of people don't appreciate that at all. They think that's boring, or they don't want that at all. They want excitement and drama, and even if it's terrible suffering. Well, it's interesting though, isn't it? It's my suffering, it's my story, and it's so compelling. And I can talk about that for hours together, and tell all my friends, and write books about it, draw, paint, and so forth. Nothing wrong with any of that. It's just, it is a choice, isn't it? And we often choose suffering. We often choose to suffer because it's much more interesting, seemingly. So the actual path of practice is not for everyone, because not everyone wants peace, because they don't know. We have to learn, don't we, to appreciate peace. And we generally learn through disappointment and disillusionment, don't we? When things get really difficult, then we start to crave or lean towards a more peaceful state. And so all of life is really, teaching us. I would say, I think the universe is extremely benevolent. That's my sense, that actually everything in nature wants us to be free. And so we'll be taught. We'll be given the lessons again and again. And if we're obstinate, then the lessons become quite unpleasant ones. It's a bit like the bears coming into Canmore. They come into Canmore to find a nice bit of compost or a nice rubbish bin full of leftovers or whatever. They smell something, don't they? And they come and raid the bins and trash the place. And then, if they do that more than once or twice or 3 times, then somebody's going to try and catch them. The peace officer will come and catch them, conservation officer, won't they? And the sheriff will come out and round them up, maybe, and then take them somewhere away. And if they're stubborn, if they're really, really full of desire and craving for what they just experienced, they might try and come back. And if they keep coming back again and again, then they get tagged, don't they? And there'll be people are keeping an eye on them now. Mara's got them now, And now, if they had wisdom, they would recognize, okay, I have to let go of this. I have to move on. This is just not a good habit to pursue, to cultivate. But if they're stubborn, if they're obstinate, if they don't see clearly, if there's ignorance there, then they'll just keep coming back, and in the end they get killed. They get killed for that, and that's just what it's like for us. That's just what it's like. There's many similes, actually, similar to what I just said, in the Buddha's teaching of the deer trapper, the hunter who lays the snares for the deer. It's exactly the same situation. In this case, Mara is obviously the hunter, laying the snares, and the wise deer just steer clear of the snares, even though it's really enticing. It's really like the most delicious food right there for them. And they have to notice there's the pleasure there, but there's also the danger. And if we're wise, we see the danger before we take the pleasure. We let go of the pleasure because we know the danger. And this is really pointing to desire. We know the danger of following desire and the danger of following aversion. And, so to save our lives, we need to wake up to this. And this is the cultivation of peace. It's like to realize all the excitement and thrill of life is very dangerous. It's not being a killjoy, it's the opposite, because it's miserable to be on a roller coaster the whole life, seeking thrills, seeking drama. It's miserable. At the end of the day, what's really joyful, isn't it, is peace. And slowly, we start to appreciate this with wisdom, with practice. If we take the Buddha's full prescription, follow the Eightfold Path, everything helps us then. Everything helps us. The way we live, the way we treat people, the way we talk, the way we think, the intentions that we cultivate, everything helps us to develop mindfulness. And through developing mindfulness, we develop stillness and this appreciation of peace. And that is with, the sense of self falling away. And had a really good question last time I gave a talk at the end about, well, what is the self then? I was talking about the 5 khandhas. What do we know? What do we experience? What is there to be known? And one of the ways, one of the frameworks for looking at our experience is the 5 khandhas. There's the body. We can know the body. We can know feelings in the body. We can know perceptions as they arise and pass. Mental formations, all the ways in which we think and process and remember and so forth. And then consciousness, that which knows, that which observes, the mirror that receives all the input. So these are the ways that we experience reality. And the Buddha said we need to recognize, if we want peace, if we want to be free from suffering, just recognize that none of these belong to us. We can't make them mine. Why? Because they're constantly changing, like everything else. He said, the experience of the body, he said, it's like a lump of foam on the beach. When you have the waves crashing out on, and you get these foam, these bubbles. I used to live in New Zealand, and there was a lot of sea foam there. It was wonderful. You go on the beach and just watch these crashing waves on the shore, and the foam would be blowing around in the wind. Magnificent scenes. And the Buddha said the body's just like a lump of foam, so ephemeral, full of space, really. Just made of space, pretty much, mostly space. And very fragile, very vulnerable, not lasting. And he said, feelings, he said, are like bubbles on the water, bubbles on the surface of the water. Again, they just come and go. I think of it like a Coke, a fizzy drink, a carbonated drink, just watching the bubbles coming up. That's feelings. They really do arise and pass, don't they, very quickly. And then they're gone. And then the next one comes. And it's so fleeting, so ephemeral. He said perceptions are like a mirage in the desert, which is very interesting. They're not just insubstantial, but they're illusory, They're not real. They give you an impression of something. You think it's this, and actually it's not, it doesn't exist. You see a mirage, isn't it? Like, or when you're driving on a hot road and you see all these great big puddles ahead. It looks so refreshing. No, it's an illusion. It's an optical illusion. Perception is a kind of an optical illusion for us. As I said the other day, we can never be sure of what we're perceiving. We name and label things, but of course that's just words and concepts. We do not know what we're seeing. Just because we saw millions of trees in the past, when I look out of the window and I see these things, you know, it's a whole new experience. These long sort of posts, brown posts with green bits, fluffy bits all round. You know, that there's no one tree. There's no, if we label, when we perceive, and we give the label, which happens very quickly, I know what that is, I've seen those, I've got that down, then we're losing probably about 90% of our seeing, you know, in that process of categorizing. We've stopped seeing, we're living in the past. So perception, like a mirage, very unreliable, very fleeting, not self. And the Buddha said, Sankara, all the thoughts we've ever had or ever will have, all the sense of me and my life, all the views, opinions, the knowledge that we have about everything. He said, it's like a plantain tree, like a palm tree, or like an onion. You just peel away the layers through investigation. You can peel away, you can really dive into the experience, and you can just watch things, watch all the concepts falling away. And what's left? Absolutely nothing at all. There's a hollow center, just space. There's no hardwood, there's no seed, there's no stone, there's nothing solid to be found there. And this is so helpful, you know, because we tend to hold on to our views and our opinions more than almost anything else. And just to recognize that they're hollow. You can't back them up. You can't find an ultimate truth in those. You can't prove anything. You know, it's best just to let go, ASAP. Don't hold on to any ideas, thoughts, views, you know. Hollow, insubstantial, not self. And finally, the Buddha spoke about consciousness and gave the simile of the magician's trick. So it's an illusion again. It's like a fabrication. It's something that's created by the mind to create the sense of self, the sense of ownership, the ego tunnel. The ego tunnel, like a tunnel that's created out of all the input, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and thinking, and knitting all of these things together to create a solid tube. And we're moving through that tube. We have a sense of time, we're moving through, and a sense of this solidity all around us. That's me, my world. And it's all a fabrication. It's brilliant. A magician's clever. Magicians are clever, aren't they? They do tricks that are really clever. And we're impressed by them. And we applaud and so on. And they get paid money to do these tricks. And some of them are really brilliant. And we don't know how they do it. It's like, how did they do that? Sawing the person in half, that sort of thing. How did they do that? You know, optical illusions again. But it's very clever, and our consciousness is incredibly clever at creating the sense of self. But as the Buddha said, it's a complete trick. It's a you know, we're being duped. We're being duped. We're being had by Mara every moment. It's very, very powerful, this show, you know, this creation. And it's really hard for us to see through. We have to kind of chip away gradually, generally. Just take one card away, or one light that's creating a sense of form somewhere, one aspect of the trick at a time. And slowly, slowly it dismantles in front of our eyes. And we can feel free. We can feel free. We can feel really great relief as this process happens, because it's very tiring to be living an ignorant life. It's very tiring to be constantly creating the illusion that we're holding to give us the sense of self at all. We're creating something that doesn't exist. So where is the self then? was the question. So if every aspect of our experience is out of control, not me and mine, constantly changing, where's this self? And the answer, of course, that the Buddha gave is that there is no self. There is no self. And I think when we meditate, we can start to recognize that, because we start to experience the flow of nature within and without. As we begin to experience that within, we look around and we can experience that all around us too. It's a constant flow, ever-changing flow of earth, water, fire, air, space, and consciousness, interacting in all different ways, all different combinations and permutations happening. Absolutely remarkable, extraordinary. But really, we don't want to be immersed in that. We don't want to be sucked into the matrix. We want to step back from the matrix. And funnily enough, the matrix is in the Abhidharma, the higher teachings of the Buddha. Reality is described as a matrix. And there are all these different components, and they all interact with one another to create, everything that we know. But there is actually, when you really develop some peace and stillness, you can see it's all just a extraordinary playing out of all these different factors. And one can divide reality and dissect reality and see it for what it is, all these different component parts. And then to be, holding on to any of those, trying to create anything out of those, to be swayed and affected by those, we can start to see that that's not necessary for us. We don't have to fall for the illusion. We don't have to be part of the dream. We can wake up from the dream, and slowly, that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing. And it's this is the process of being willing to sit and just allow things to unfold, to observe what's going on right now without getting in there and making things happen. This is meditation, isn't it? So this is the way, it's the doorway to the letting go of self that needs to happen to enable us to see clearly. And the letting go of self is not something we have to make happen either. It happens naturally when we follow the Buddha's teachings and develop mindfulness, develop stillness. Actually, the letting go happens quite naturally as we see clearly, as we understand dukkha. We just have to observe really with energy, with application, with clear seeing, sampajanya, to clearly comprehend. So it's so helpful to, again and again, come back to the Buddha's teachings, take them in, contemplate them. When the Buddha says there's no self, what do I make of that? My whole experience is completely saying something different. It's saying the opposite. So what do I make of that? And to really allow ourselves to consider these teachings deeply and really examine for ourselves. I mean, as the Buddha said, not to believe a word he says, but rather test it out, test the teaching out. So to investigate, where is this sense of self? Where am I? Where am I? Okay, I'll sit and meditate. Where am I? Well, I'm this body for a start. Am I? Well, no, not really, because I can't make it eternally youthful. I can't stop it dying. I can't even control it, really, to a great extent. All these processes are going on. It's nothing to do with what I think of as me. Like, I'm not actually able to manipulate in different ways the body. The body's changing all the time. So we start to recognize, well, no, actually, No, this body, I can't say I have any agency here. Not really. Very, very limited sense of control at all. And the same with all the other khandhas, the other heaps of experience. Because we recognize, don't we, when we meditate, that the mind has its own mind. The mind has a mind of its own. It's not our mind. And that's quite destabilizing to begin to recognize that, and a bit scary. It's a bit scary. But we do recognize, don't we, that thoughts keep coming and going. And I might be thinking, I don't want to think right now. I just want to be feeling the breath, noticing the breath. Does that happen? Just because we want it to? You know, so we start to recognize the mind is its own karma. It has its own karma. There's a momentum there that is simply happening. And the best thing I can do is to not get involved, just to observe it, to observe nature, observe the physical nature all around us, and observe the mental nature, the consciousness, the heart mind. Observe that and recognize through this observation, through this application of right attention, we get to recognize that all these aspects, all these khandhas, the perceptions, the mental formations, and consciousness itself, they all have their own karma. It's like the 5 different animals. We've got 5 animals, and we're trying to herd them all together and make them a me. No, just let go. We can let go of that tendency to create myself and start to notice all these disparate energies and forces that we can observe through our meditation, and just learn from every experience. And then we can kind of come to a place of recognizing, well, yeah, I can't really make any of these mine. I can't say this is me, this body, this breath, these feelings, this thought, this memory. I can't say any of it's really me, because it's so fleeting, it's so ephemeral, it's so delusory in some ways. So what is me? Well, let's keep looking. Let's keep looking, because this question, who am I? What is it? Is really the whole spiritual path. And we do really well for ourselves, actually, if we apply our minds to this question. Let this be the burning koan for life. You know, can I find something here that is mine, or that is permanent, which is sort of saying the same thing, or that is satisfactory, that is, you know, inherently satisfactory, a refuge for me? Can I find that? And I think it's just the whole path, this investigation, because we slowly come to a place of recognizing, well, there's really nothing in samsara, in this world, that is reliable and can be a refuge for me. But there is one thing that's beginning to feel like solid ground, and that's this knowing, that's this awareness, Buddha, you know, awake. There's something here that I can start to really depend upon, to really trust this awareness of what? Of Dhamma, truth, reality. Oh, this is a refuge. The truth of change, the truth of that it's all impersonal, the truth of dukkha. These are reliable. These are laws that are consistent. Dhamma. So the Buddha seeing the Dhamma, you know, this becomes, you know, letting go of all the other senses of refuge in the simple things like my body, my house, my life, my friends, my family, seeing how those things are inherently unreliable because they don't last. We start to come to this place of seeing what's really genuinely a place of refuge for us, and just keep dwelling there, you know. Let the Buddha see the Dhamma. You know, that is our destiny. That is the best we can do for ourselves. That's the whole purpose of having chosen, having come back, having had to go through this process of rebirth yet again. We've always had this opportunity to be free. Now we can take the opportunity. We have the conditions. We have the fortunate conditions to be able to be Buddha, seeing Dhamma. We are Sangha. That's another refuge. We can rely on our own practice. Our teachers and our friends practice together and see how we can support one another in the practice, in the goodness of the practice. Refuge in Sangha, the noble community, the community of wise and virtuous beings. That's reliable too. I can find, not this particular person. It's not like that. It's more like the Sangha is a collective. It's the collective goodness of the human heart. Yeah, that's another refuge for me. And we won't find self in any of these things. But, the truth is there is no self. There never was. There never will be. and there certainly isn't right now. And so to stop creating that illusion, to step back and let the illusions deconstruct themselves. Buddha seeing Dhamma. So I wish you all very well with the practice and hope these words have some benefit for you. Ewan.
Andamayam Dhammatakaya Sadhukaram Dadamase Sadhu, Sadhu, Sadhu.
So we just have a few minutes if anyone would like to come in with reflection, sharing, question. Feel very welcome. Yeah, Sujata, hi.
Hi, Aya. Thank you so much for that talk. And oh man, they're just, I would like to have a whole discussion around some of the points that you were raising, around the overwhelm and the trauma experience of that tsunami. But I want to take it back to the very beginning when you talked about Bhava Tanha, because one of the things I reflect on is that, oh, I'm going to get a little emotional. I'm sorry. I have had the good fortune to have this birth and this time of learning Dhamma. And I get very frustrated with my practice because I can't train this mind. It's going too slow. So I guess I sort of think I sort of anticipate what your answer might be, but do you have any words of encouragement, not about making it go faster, but just in ways that I can direct my practice to influence a future rebirth to even greater fortune in order to practice even more deeply?
Thank you so much for that lovely question, and such a helpful one for everybody, I'm sure, because we're all in the same boat. We're all struggling, it's very difficult to just cut through, all the obscurations. And so one thing that comes to my mind immediately is how highly the Buddha praised patience. The reason for that, of course, is that we all have to apply a lot of patience because of how it is for us. It's no stroll in the park sort of thing. It's the hardest thing we can do. It's the hardest task to purify this heart mind. So the Buddha said patient endurance is the highest austerity, as I'm sure you know. And I think this is a really significant teaching. I apply it again and again. And the quality of patience, that quality of being okay with the way it is, and not really, any energies that are hoping for progress and change and for things to go a certain way, to be aware of those energies and just to be willing to see them. And then, of course, they can fade away, because to be able to practice in a contented way is to accept, the way it is right now. And I think that's powerful, Sujata. It's very powerful to notice any resistance to what is right now, any sense of it not being okay, because that's the problem. There's no other problem here. It's just the sense of not all right that we can have. So we can direct our attention towards that source of dukkha, and see what happens. It frees us up, you know, because we all have the tendency to judge our lives and our practice. And that's another layer of suffering that we can really do without. Because the truth is, you're doing great. And the Buddha said that, you know, even a moment of mindfulness, he said it's of enormous value. It's more valuable than, you know, piles of gold or 100 dishes of rice, or there's all these different similes, comparing one moment of mindfulness, one mindful breath, to a huge material offerings and huge material wealth. So I think that tells us something important, which is that it's very good to be generous. It's very important to develop virtue. It's vital. But the fact that you're practicing, that we're practicing mindfulness, that we're willing to actually renounce the world in order to meditate at all, we have to renounce the world, don't we? To sit, stop, and be aware. This is a tremendous force in the universe, and it's a very, very wholesome karma. So I think you can really kind of rest in that, you know, feel the benefit of the work that's being done, of the willingness to practice, and patient endurance. And that goes for all of us. I mean, that's so helpful. Thank you very much for kind of bringing it to where we are now, and how we do need encouragement, and keep encouraging ourselves, patience, and also a lot of loving kindness, wishing ourselves well. That's a great benefit in the world also. It's a huge virtue to practice metta, even a moment of metta, never mind bringing the metta practice, loving kindness, into our practice every day. But that's a great benefit, because meditation is to be enjoyed. So if we're feeling miserable, if we're feeling stressed and not good enough, then time to cultivate and bring in metta and feel good. Feel good. You have every reason to feel extremely well and happy in this lifetime. And there's a movement for sure from brightness to greater brightness, or from what can sometimes feel like darkness, you know, to brightness. So I hope those words can be of some encouragement. Thank you, everybody. I'm so sorry I'm going to have to stop here, but I wonder if I could possibly hand over to Sanghamita, because Kelly has a question.
Could you have to take your computer?
Yeah, but no, I don't. I don't actually. It's okay. So thanks, everybody. I'm going to have to say bye-bye, but don't go just yet.